Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And some fun cards using the newest March release from AlteNew. So many new things. So yeah, I am participating in, I think today's an Instagram hop. I have to check my planner. I think that's what I'm part of. It'll be listed and linked in the description box below once I sit down and I'm doing my editing. Anyway, I'll have links to all the things in the description box below, but instead of me just sitting here and petting the so yeah, links will be below. I'll link to the new release. I'll link to the supplies I use, etc. My blog post, all the info will be in the blog post, of course. So that'll be in the description box below. You can expand that. All of my links are affiliate links, and that just means that if you use my links and place an order, I get a little kickback at no cost to you guys, and that's adds up throughout the month, and that's what helps pay the bills, keeps me from literally freezing in my garage. So yeah, keep watching. I'll show you guys how I made these cards, and then all the info will be below for you guys. Okay, so apologies that the intro was chopped up a bit for those that might have noticed. My original intro, I was planning on using other products from this release, and then I got sidetracked on the Craft Your Life Splendid Bouquet project kit, which I'm showing right now. And it comes as a great big 6x8 stamp set. And there's a coordinating die set that die cuts that large floral. Are any of you surprised? And the sentiments. And then there's a layering stencil set to color everything in. And then there is a embossing folder. And yeah, I went to town with this. So I'm holding an A2 piece of cardstock. Large floral. Right there. You got me. I actually have one of AlteNew's previous Craft Your Life project kits, one of the floral ones. I purchased it about a month ago. I think it was last month's release. I'm not 100% certain. It's sitting here waiting for me to get more time to make videos. But anyway, I used this one, so hooray. So, first thing I did was I figured out that to use the AlteNew embossing folders in my Griffin EMPRESS machine, got the sandwich instructions right there. One cutting plate, just the magnetic mat, and then the folder. And I sprayed my cardstock lightly with water first. That just helps get a deeper impression. Look at it. And honestly, ones like this, I think patterns like that, you could, if you really want to do clean and simple, you could just emboss, leave it like that. Just white cardstock, add a sentiment, maybe add a little splatter, and it's classy. However, I'm going to use the stencils, of course. So I took more pieces of the same white cardstock, and I'm going to stamp that big floral onto it with the AlteNew Obsidian black ink. And I used my anti-static powder tool on all those pieces of cardstock first, so that the embossing powder I use doesn't cling to anything other than the stamped image. So I stamped it with the obsidian ink, and then I'm coating it all with clear embossing powder and tapping off the excess. And I'm doing this multiple times because, like I said, I went to town. I was just I had ideas. And I wanted to have fun, and I did. So I stamped this multiple times on multiple pieces of cardstock. Coated it all with the clear embossing powder. You can technically either let it air dry. I'm not sure how, this stuff would take long. The obsidian ink from AlteNew, it's very similar to VersaFine black ink in formulation, in my opinion. So you either got to let it dry or heat set it, or in my case, I just prefer heat embossing it. So anyway, then I pulled out the stencils, and I was looking at them, and I was like, ooh, this might take me a little bit to, it's going to take me a minute to figure it out. And then it says, thankfully, right on the back of the packaging of the stencils, it's check the packaging of the stamps. It's got a guide. I was like, oh, that's right. I'm still getting used to the AlteNew stuff. So yeah, you pull out the packaging for the stamp set, and it unfolds like I showed, and you've got a whole guide. It even gives you some card ideas. So I literally just propped that up on my desk so I could just follow that guide, and it just made everything easy. This is, though, one of those things that once you do it once, it just makes sense. And I'm using some AlteNew fresh dye inks. Some of them AlteNew has sent to me, and then I've purchased some. I have been curious about these inks for a while. I'm not going to do like a review on them per se, because this was literally my very first time using these inks. So far, I like them. The round ink pad, I thought I wouldn't care for. I don't mind them. The colors are nice too. These ones are the felt topped, like firmer ink pad. So if you don't like the really squishy foam pads like the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated or the Concord 9th ink pads, these are more like your traditional, like what we were always used to, just a different shape. So anyway, I started with my lightest shade of pink. This is Rose Quartz, and part 1 of the stencil. The stencils are all labeled, and there's even like a line etched into the stencils because there's generally like 2 parts per stencil, which is what kind of threw me off a bit. But when you look at the guide, it's like, oh, it makes sense. It's all laid out. They even give you like color suggestions, everything. I didn't use any of the color suggestions because I was in a pink mood, so that's what we're going with. So I just went though worked my way lightest to darkest. It was simple. And it lines up over the 3D or like the embossing folder as well. So everything just works. So I made sure to clean off, since there's 2 parts on each stencil, I would clean off the ink. And even then, I still managed to get ink everywhere. I didn't bother working on any of my like sticky mats or grip mats or anything because I was doing so many that I just decided it was easier to do it this way versus having to have all my grip mats out, peeling everything off, etc., etc. This just worked. If I was only doing 1 or 2, 100% pull out those grip mats or tape down things, but this worked. I just noticed near like closer to the end that I was starting to make more of a mess on some of the panels, but I also wasn't worried about it because I'm die cutting most of the stamped florals. There's one panel that I managed to keep pretty much clean and like smear free. That one I'm going to use as is, but I'll get to that later. Anyway, I did Rose Quartz first, and then Puffy Heart, and then now I'm working with Purple Wine. And I've got a little blending brush, and that's it. You just apply the ink. It's simple. And there's something, I've talked about this before with like layering stencil sets because so many brands have them now. And while I will never give up coloring in my images, watercoloring and alcohol markers and all the things, there is something just ridiculously satisfying about stenciling images like this. Like every time I left the stencil, I was like, ooh, it's fabulous. And I like the look of it too. There's something that doing a stencil blend, you get that smooth blend that is very difficult to achieve. I point this out because I remember way back in the day, like before all the things, back in the dark ages of card making, before we had stencils and alcohol markers and all the things, trying to get like a smooth blend on things was so difficult. Like it just wasn't really a thing back then. And yeah, I think that's why I love having stencils and doing ink blending. Anyway, for the flower centers, I used Citronella. That was the lighter kind of goldy green color. And then for the ends of the little stamens, I'm using green gold. And this is where I start bringing in little bits of Post-it tape here and there because some sections of the stencils are very close to the edge. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm going over the edge because I'm just messy like that, So after I did all those parts, you go on to the leaves. And for the first stencil, I'm using Volcano Lake. I went with this kind of greeny blue trio. And yeah, each layer I added, I was like, this is fun. So Volcano Lake was the first one. And then I went in with Lagoon, so a shade darker. And you could stop here. Like everything's filled in because the final stencil is the very detailed. So it depends on the look you're going for. Now that I'm thinking about it though, even doing like the fine detail with like a paste, like a glitter paste, that would look really nice too. Anyway, like I told you guys, the ideas don't stop. Anyway, this last detail stencil is where I go in with my darkest shades. So for the florals, I use Cosmic Berry. And this is where it really starts coming together. And again, using my Post-it tape because I was getting just excited and going past the edges of the stencils. So I just went around and did everything like I always do. You know, I had done my embossing on those 2 panels first. I did all my stamping and heat embossing of the main images. Then I do all the stenciling. And for each one, I did, you know, everything at once. You know, so I did all that first layer of ink in one go. And then the next one and then the next one. It just makes sense, in my opinion. And it makes everything go faster. So I did all that, the detail on the florals with that Cosmic Berry. And then for the greenery, it's, I used Emerald and blended out, and right there, removing the stencil, I was like, this is fun. So I did that on all the panels, and then on those final, ones that I used the embossing folder on, which you get that no line look, but then you have the embossing. That is fun. I like it. And I'll show at the end, I'll kind of tilt these in the light so you guys can kind of see that embossing because it is difficult to see on camera. So after I did all my stenciling, so everything's colored in, I took scraps of white cardstock and I did the exact same thing. I used my anti-static powder tool and I lined up some of the big sentiments from that stamp set, and I'm going to stamp them with that obsidian black ink and then heat emboss them with the clear embossing powder. And I'm going to stamp a couple panels, and then I stamped the birthday one an extra time too because I wanted to have, I need to like build up my birthday card stash. So that's why I've been making more birthday cards lately. So stamped those, coated them with the clear embossing powder, heated that up with my heat tool till everything was smooth and melted. And then I used the coordinating wafer dies for all of those to die cut all of those sentiments. And then I did the same thing with 3 of the florals that I had stamped and heat embossed. Like I said, one of the panels I managed to keep like no fingerprints, no smears. Shocking. So that one I didn't die cut. I'm going to trim it down just with my paper trimmer just to give it, you know, a different look. But 3 of them I die cut. And then this is where I kind of started jumping around because like I was getting ahead of myself with things. So I started doing the insides of my cards too. So a couple of them are going to just be top folding white note cards. And I lined up that big floral image and I'm stamping it on the insides with that lightest shade of pink inks. So the rose quartz. So I stamped that on the inside of 2 of the card bases. And then I took just some panels of thinner white cardstock and stamping it onto that because the other card bases I'm going to do darker cardstock with. So I just did all this, you know, all this at once. Stamped all of these while everything was lined up, stuck it in my MISTI, inked it up with that rose quartz ink, stamped it, and then went on to the next thing, which was I die cut scraps of heavyweight white cardstock with the large floral coordinating wafer die. And then I'm stacking 2 layers together and then putting those behind a couple of those floral images that I'd stenciled. So this is going to give them dimension, and it just saves me from having to fiddle with a whole bunch of foam tape because these 2 I wanted to stick directly onto one of the card bases. So it was just easier, and I'm going to trim off the edges, etc., which I'm going to show in a minute. So adhering them together like this also, I do this too when I'm just not in the mood to deal with, you know, if I have to cut lots of little pieces of foam tape or whatever, it's just easier to use the coordinating die cut. Die cut a few scraps of cardstock, adhere them together. There you go. You've got your dimension. So I just adhered those layers together with my craft tacky glue. And then once all of these are stacked together, I'm going to stick them directly onto one of the card bases and then trim off the excess. And then I'm actually going to use one of the little pieces I trim off just to fill in kind of the one edge, just cause. So add that glue to them, stick that down to my card base. And then you can generally, like, you could let the glue dry, but knowing me, I would, because there's, you know, glue on all the other parts. I didn't want to get that everywhere because it would happen. Either that or it was going to end. I was like, oh, I'll just set this aside and let it dry. But again, knowing me, I'd end up like setting it aside somewhere and like permanently adhering it to something else. So I trimmed off the little bits. You got to be careful cutting through layers of heavyweight cardstock like this, trust me, I wasn't paying attention, and thankfully with the magic of video editing, you know, I silence out all the things, because, you know, I keep my voiceovers family friendly, but my actual card making, not so much all the time. So anyway, when I was cutting through all those layers of cardstock, even though those scissors are really good, I wasn't thinking and I wasn't paying attention, and I ended up like pinching one of my fingers really bad. Like, I have a bruise. It's not pretty. And I said some not pretty things when I did it. So just pay more attention. Do as I say, not as I do. So I trimmed off those bits and then let that adhesive dry, stamped one of the sentiments from the set onto the inside with the obsidian ink. And then for this card front, since I'm only adhering one of these, so I don't have to fiddle with too many, I placed it kind of where I was going to put it on the card, flipped it over, traced with a pencil where the edges of the card base will be, so I don't place any of my little foam squares past those pencil lines, and then stuck thin foam squares on the back of this, and then I just use those pencil lines as my guide to just press the card front right onto that. And same thing, trimmed off the excess with my scissors, and then I decided I wanted to add some twine. So I had removed one of the little foam squares from behind it before I even adhered it. And then I pulled up that one, the one I have underneath that little top flower. So I could thread this twine kind of through and underneath that. And then I'm just going to wrap that around the card base a couple times and then tie this into a nice little bow. So just use my reverse tweezers, fiddled with it for a bit till I got it where I wanted it, and then you remove the tweezers, tighten that bow up, and then trim off the excess. And then I decided on splatter, because of course I did. So I used just some tape to hold these two card bases down so I don't get splatter like all over the insides of the cards. The other ones are just the panels. And then I moved everything else out of the way, which was a good thing I did, because I did manage to get splatter absolutely everywhere. Even though I'm using my splat box, I still managed to get it everywhere. So for the first bit of splatter, I'm using my Gonzai Tombi Starry Colors, and the gold, of course, I'd already added water to it. So I'm just swirling that up with my fan brush till I was happy with it, and then splattering this onto these two card bases with my little fan brush. And then I was like, it needs pink splatter as well. So I started playing little mixologist again. I've shown this before. I like doing stuff like this. I used to do this when I owned a salon and did, like, for those that aren't aware, I am a professionally trained and certified like esthetician, and I used to own a salon and do nails and nail art and all that kind of stuff. And mixing colors was like one of my things. Like, I could match people's nails to anything. It was just fun. So I still do that time to time in weird little ways like this to make my splatter match. You know, it's just what we do. So I used spun sugar distress paint, added a drop of aged mahogany, wasn't exactly the color I wanted, so I added a drop of picked raspberry, and I got the exact color of pink I wanted. So patted myself on the back over that. It looks like there's a ton of paint on my palette. There's not. It's not very much at all. It was a few drops. So added a bit of water to thin it down, splattered that onto those backgrounds, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing to those remaining panels. So I've got the two that I had embossed with the embossing folder and then stenciled. So I'm going to add that pink splatter, and then the remaining panel that I had kept clean and then added splatter. So added the pink and then cleaned out my brush. I'll clean off my palette. Distress paint does dry permanent, so you want to make sure you clean things off. And then I added that final bit of gold splatter to these last ones, and then just set them all aside, aka just pile them up in places where my elbows can't get at them to let that splatter dry. So got that all done, and while the splatter was drying, that's where, you know, I finished my card bases. For the dark card bases, that's Simon's Peacock cardstock. Yeah. So those are just, all of my cards are A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then the panels that I had stamped on the thinner white cardstock, I trimmed those down with my paper trimmer. So they were like, and same with these panels, the ones that I embossed and stenciled, etc. I trimmed these down as well, so that all of them are like 3 3/4 by 5 inches, so that the card bases will give it, like, frame it up nicely. and then added more baker's twine. And then these panels I'm popping up with AlteNew's foam tape, because I've shown this in a couple videos. I've had a lot of you guys asking me what my opinions are of the AlteNew foam tape, and I like it. I got a couple rolls of it. I have been using it. It's obviously a bit thicker. I would call this like the standard thickness of foam tape. And yeah, the release paper comes off great. It's good stuff. Like 2 thumbs up. So it just depends on like how much dimension you want. This would be your standard, and then the stuff that I use a lot is like Simon's Big Mama foam tape, which is about half as thick as this. So it just depends on like the lift, you know? So after I got all my panels adhered onto their card bases, all those sentiments that I had stamped and heat embossed and die cut, I popped onto all the different cards. And then as my final bit of embellishment, I'm using the AlteNew Sweet Dreams enamel dots, because the colors went very nicely with the greeny blue inks that I used for the leaves. So like I always do with self-adhesive enamel dots like this, I just use my little die pick to peel them off the backing sheet and then stick them right to my card base. So I just went through and did that to all of these cards. And once these are adhered into place, all of these cards are complete. So, like I said, I had so much fun making these, even though I was totally distracted and I was going to make something completely different with other items from this release. But stay tuned. I will have a video for that coming very soon. So here are all the finished cards. I've got that first one that I didn't die cut, this one that I stacked the die cuts with all the cardstock, and then this one that I just popped along the bottom with foam squares. And then the final 2 that I had used the embossing folder on. And I do love that no line look. This is, for me, especially with stenciling, because I've talked about this, I love like the look of no line, like no line coloring, things like that. But I do not have the patience. It is rare that I will do no line coloring, but doing something like this with stencils and an embossing folder, love it, and way less time. So those are the finished cards. I will have links to all the things, and I was right in my intro when I wasn't sure what was going on. Yeah, I'm part of an Instagram hop, so I'll have a link to my Instagram in the description box below. And then, of course, my supply list, links to all the things, link to my blog post, all of that will be in the description box below for anyone who is interested. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.